Okay, we move on now to the third deputation. I understand it's Sona Matani on behalf of our Tottenham. You have 3 minutes.
Hang on, that's it. Chair, thanks very much for the opportunity. Can I just clarify, before the meeting I thought I had 5 minutes. I've timed myself beautifully, and so I'll be editing as I go along as speedily as I can. But thanks for the opportunity to put our case to you. Shall I kick off? Just to clarify, before we start, you've got us down as our Tottenham. We've kind of come together as a group of community centres in the borough, and we're going for the simple option of Harringay Community Centres Network, so people know what we do. Okay. We come today as partners with the Council in serving the needs of Harringay residents. Our sector provides an unparalleled range of diverse services and facilities throughout the borough, based mainly on self-funding and extensive volunteering. Saving huge sums of money for the Council and statutory services, we promote community cohesion, awareness and empowerment, and all kinds of cultural, educational, social and economic opportunities that contribute to Council strategies. Our key concerns today are that the Community Buildings Review's recommendations include proposed very short leases in the future, vastly increased rents, potential sell-offs or demolitions of some buildings. We've been looking forward to reading this pivotal review for our sector, but in fact it feels as if we're actually only reading the covering report to a review that we've yet to see, although it's been 3 years in the making. Based on the limited information we have, we're here to make our case to you about why the analysis still remains unclear and flawed to us, and to highlight key information gaps and perspectives that we feel are missing. The information that you have as a report needs to be seen alongside the underpinning wealth of evidence that centres have provided to prove our usefulness, benefits and outcomes for Harringay residents. Our crucial concerns as a sector are about the rental charges, short leases and community asset transfer aspects that need thorough consideration too. We'd also welcome joint consultative events and partnership activities with the Council to discuss and address the common issues that are thrown up by this report. If adopted today, this could adversely affect most of the Council's community-run centres in Council-owned buildings, which includes hundreds of the borough's community groups. It will also impact on tens of thousands of local residents who use the centre's facilities and have not yet been consulted. We request that members should postpone decision-making to consider its implications, give time for consultation and feedback to improve it, and work with the centres to achieve the goals of the community strategy. This is a constructive request because we want to ensure, firstly, that the community strategy and the community buildings review should be actively linked. The community strategy actually, we feel, has got a lot of valuable objectives in it that we can strongly support. The community buildings review, in large measure, seems to undermine that and is working in an opposite direction. Secondly, we want the Council to be realistic about its income ambitions. We've seen 1.4 million there. If there are no community groups due to high rents, then these targets are unrealistic and setting community centres up to fail. Some organisations could be asked to pay as much as $150,000 per annum in rent. Thirdly, we request that the Council take a holistic approach given the challenges that we're all facing locally following £70 million worth of cuts, followed by £110 million of cuts as part of the strategy going forward, working together in a stronger Harringay. Also, we also collectively face £12 billion worth of cuts nationally in welfare. I will do. The importance is for us to work collaboratively together and to deliver more for less in times of higher demand. To conclude, our centre also brings in lots of funding and we could do so much more together. The short lease arrangements do undermine that and chasing core funding will divert us from finding the resources for delivery. Therefore, can I conclude by asking if the Council will work with us to find a solution that meets everyone's objectives and not rush to a decision that could lose the Council and residents' income and services that they need?
Yep. Thank you. Cabinet, are there any questions? Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question to which I slightly know the answer because I was at the Irish Centre on Friday, but I think it might benefit all of us. Could you tell us a little bit about the other types of funding that you try to attract into the borough? You spoke about chasing core funding and then the others that you're able to bring in on top.
Many centres have attracted funding from the Big Lottery. There's Reaching Communities programmes out there right now. We ourselves have done some crowdfunding. I know my colleagues have been very successful with different funding streams. Actually, looking forward, in our sector, there's lots of opportunities for community enterprise and a wide range of trusts, foundations, and so on. Many of the organisations that are housed inside our buildings are often chasing those sorts of funds, and our approach has been to maximise our own facilities income. But can I ask my colleagues to join in too?
Yes, Councillor, I had the pleasure of having you last week, and you took a look around the area, and you probably saw quite a number of services, including the Advice and Information Service, and the Daycare and Lunch Club, and they have been benefited from the core grants, and then we had the Harringay investment grants over the years, which no longer are, which are due to finish in August 2015. But we are fortunate in having money from the Irish government to, support the services. The advice service and the daycare and lunch club. But I think and I was talking to you about this, the Care Act of 2014 are going to put new strenuous obligations on the Council. The level of need is going to become, where before you had critical need, where the Council were obliged to support that. Now, the whole business of well-being is coming in. So, and I was just looking at a programme on the NHS last night where the NHS is at a critical stage where alternatives to doing things that have been, that have been done up to now are being looked at. So it's about more getting places or services like daycare lunch clubs, which the Council used to run in the old days. They don't run them anymore. We've went through that whole period, but the centres can run these services in a cost-effective way and can be a huge benefit to the Council going forward. Once the Care Act becomes embedded and people start to challenge the Council on the services, then I think there is huge scope for voluntary community buildings to assist the Council on that.
Thank you.
That one. Just to add, actually, that obviously you represent our residents, and so do we. We've been around a long time. It's more than 30 years that we've been working together with the Council, as you know. The important part is with the closure of so many other services, be the mental health institutions or whether it's the daycare, etc., the centres are getting more and more people that are coming in that need a holistic approach, which we have been trying to achieve. That's critically important. But even going for other grants is always very difficult. Even we try to generate. At the end of the day, though, you do still need a base amount whatever you want to call it, that actually will then be recognised by any funding group as being recognised also by the council that we all represent. And that's extremely important because obviously costs go up. We found what we do also in the centres, which I know is also in all the strategies of the borough, because we've been looking at all of them, obviously, that people want to be dealt with in a holistic way. They don't want to be running around the borough, which they don't do. The whole point of our centres, which is important, is that people come in and then they're dealt with in that sort of holistic way, which actually benefits the council, because we're doing a job that, in fact, who would be doing this? We're also very important that everybody knows that we're providing prevention in all our strategies that we've looked at, that obviously the council come up with and we've had a look at ourselves as well. What we're doing is preventing things getting more difficult and out of order in the coming years. We think that's really important. We've been talking about 15 to 18 in the actual strategies, which are extremely important. The other thing is, I think everybody's been seeing things like the reports on things like dementia and Alzheimer's and what have you. We've got a population that need those sort of services, and we believe that our centres really are providing that support. So what we're saying is, and what you said, Sonia, is we want a delay on anything on any decisions. Obviously, we need you also to have a look at us too, for you also to consult with us, which is important, and then perhaps everybody to know what we really do. We're not doing it on our own, we're doing it also in partnership, because we are borough and you are also borough. We're also serving the same community, and that's important. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Goldberg.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously this is a step change, and I guess the objectives are pretty clear in terms of trying to get everyone on a like-by-like footing. And I kind of welcome your written kind of submission as well. I'd quite interested to know what kind of engagement you've had from the service, or what offers of support you've had in terms of adjusting to what the future might look for you guys, and how clear you are about what this will mean for your organisations.
Historically, we had a link with the voluntary sector development team. Of late, we've had kind of small group meetings where officers have been quite helpfully assembled from different departments to engage us about what is involved in this community buildings review. I suppose the challenging aspect here is that the figures that are mentioned in this sort of covering report are very challenging and bracing for us, because it's the prospect of facing a 40% rent charge in year one, starting 2017, and in year two this would increase to 60%, on often quite older premises that are not modern, that in our case are not energy efficient, and many other problems I'm sure exist for colleagues. Is we are sweating these assets as best as we can. We're very efficient in running them, and the prospect of those sorts of hikes is what would threaten and undermine many of our tenants who are already struggling with funding shortages. And so in coming to you now, we have yet to embark on any support programme. That's certainly not been mentioned. Other aspects of what sort of investor-save measures that the Cabinet might want to consider, where actually reducing or changing and redesigning premises might prove fruitful to increase flexibility. Because if any of us do ever generate a surplus, of course it all goes back into the projects and activities. The other aspect is around community asset transfer policy framework. It's been mentioned that such a policy will be developed, and I would say a great form of mutual support would be to have a kind of brainstorming session and start this new way of working together as in a partnership model, rather than invent these things in-house. Is let's start them on in a new way, because certainly it will save a lot of time and energy. Just on the point of funding, Councillor Morton, I'd say that the point that we would like to highlight is we're generating 75% at least across many centres in terms of proportion of our funding. From, in effect, the community is keeping some of these centres going because they need them, because they're paying rental costs or higher charges. They wouldn't be viable unless the community really wanted to be there. There's London councils and a range of other sources that are also under strain. But what we notice in the review is that were we to face these rental charges, is some of our high charges would have to increase, and that would then have a knock-on effect. And that's what is very challenging.
Can I just make just one point? Our strength has always been that we have been able to access funds that the council probably couldn't access. We can access funds from the National Lottery, we can access funds. Now, this proposal really undercuts that strength. We cannot come up with 70, 80, 90,000 pounds, but we can apply and, for instance, we not only maintain buildings, we improve the buildings. We can apply to the National Lottery, we can apply to somebody else to put up a new toilet block, new access for disability. And that's our strength. We can do that, and over the years we've managed. But if this arrangement comes along, it's saying, property services are going to do external maintenance, but you have to come up with the rent. I mean, we can't do that. It's not possible. If the roof leaks, we can, apply here and there to get the roof fixed and maybe use some of our own reserves, apply to organisations. And that's how we have existed. And we have survived 30 years, 40 years, and we want to survive for future generations. But we cannot do it under this particular policy. It's not possible for us to survive.
Hi. I just wanted to say that, as you are aware, that the community centres have been going on for a long time. For example, Lord Morrison Hall, Afro International has been in charge of that community centre for the past 30 years. So we do know our community, we do know the people that we serve. What we are asking is for your support to enable us to serve the community better. But that's not going to happen if you are proposing a 5-year lease, which will limit our ability to secure funding, especially lottery funding, which require the terms of the lease to be longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from Cabinet? Cabinet questions? Can I ask Councillor Strickland to respond?
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader, and thank you very much all for your deputation and the answers to those questions. I think the first thing is I broadly agree with the bulk of what you said. So taking the points that you raised, I think there was one point around the council taking a holistic approach. I think you said, Sona, when we were chatting earlier, that you were pleased to see when senior staff came to see you that they were taking a single integrated approach. And what I've been very keen to see is, obviously, that the issue with community buildings is it draws on various bits of the council, the property team, the communities teams, the voluntary sector funding team. It really does draw across the council. So we have worked hard through a cross-cabinet group and a sort of cross-council group of officers to make sure we are doing this in a holistic way that absolutely recognises the really rich tapestry of what you're doing as organisations. Because my professional background's in the voluntary sector. I've been a fundraiser for charities, so I know how difficult it is, and I know how difficult it can be to convey as a community organisation the fact that actually you're adding value in lots of different ways, and most community organisations don't fit into one box or another. And so, first, to say that we absolutely appreciate that. And that's why the new community leases that we're proposing moving to in the new approach have at their heart, which I think is incredibly helpful, a clear notion of social value, so that organisations will qualify for a community lease if they can prove to the council that they're delivering value to the community. Now, that might seem like an obvious thing to say, but the reason for saying that is that, of course, we do get complaints from residents around some community organisations saying, well, hang on, we're not really sure this organisation is really delivering any value to the community. This organisation has a building, but it hasn't been used for a long time. So we obviously want to make sure that if there is a community building and essentially the taxpayer is subsidising that building, that building and the range of organisations in that building, because you said quite rightly, Sonna, most of the organisations have got a range of provision in them, and actually that is really delivering for residents. And I know that that's something that everyone at the table here is passionate about. So I think that approach to challenge organisations to say, well, look, where's the value you're delivering, will not be a problem for the bulk of people in these buildings, but I think is really important to set out. Another advantage, I think, is the flexibility, and various points that were raised by all of you around flexibility. So the new lease does give greater flexibility. It gives people flexibility around length, about how they repair, but also it gives people more flexibility in terms of subletting, which is more difficult at the moment, to allow people to bring in other partner organisations, generate more income from that, but crucially maximise the use of the buildings. Because what's driving this, is to make sure that we do have, in line with the community strategy, thriving buildings that are full of activity, which I know is what you all want to see. On the specific question of leases and grants, what the paper makes clear, and hopefully what officers made clear when you met them, is where a funder requires a longer lease, officers will be very happy indeed to have that conversation. So there is no intention at all to make it difficult for anyone to raise money, because we're very proud of the money that you and your colleagues bring into the borough, and we certainly don't want to restrict that. On asset transfer, I think there's a question around that. The reason that the paper mentions asset transfers really is a request from community organisations. So some organisations have come to us and said, well, look, we've been running services from this building for 30, 40 years. We've got the money. Well, why can't we buy the building? Now, in the past, we weren't happy to have those conversations, but I think it's really important that we do have those conversations. And very happy to take up your offer of discussing in a wider meeting with community organisations, well, how would that best work? How do we make that work? Because I know, having worked on this in the past, that asset transfer can be very bureaucratic, very legalistic, can be quite onerous for organisations. So we'll want to make sure that that works well. And then in terms of the other points you made in terms of contact and what happens next and specific recommendations, I hope what's clear from the paper is that tonight really what we're doing is agreeing a new approach to how we support community organisations through our buildings portfolio. So you would have seen from the grid and also from the detailed conversations that officers have had with all of the organisations that this is very much the starting point. There'll be further meetings, and essentially there'll be an individual discussion with each organisation to understand what you want to do, your needs, your ambitions. So while we're agreeing an overall approach, the reason that there aren't detailed recommendations by building is because it'd be quite wrong for me to sit here tonight and sort of slap a one-size-fits-all approach on community buildings. That's not what we want to do. So I think just to reassure that this tonight really is to agree on a new approach and then to actually start more detailed conversations. And hopefully you've also been reassured that the changes in changes in rents that will affect a small group of community organisations will be phased in, fairly slowly over a period of years, and how that's properly managed so as not to damage organisations. Again, very happy to pick up in the more detailed chats that officers will have with you.